Okay, hi everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about walking bass lines and how to build them. There's a fair bit to this, but there's going to be some words I'm going to use that we need to clarify right up front. I'm going to be referring to note numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I'm also going to use words like root and octave. So, depending on what note I'm talking about and what type of chord I'm talking about, whether it's a major chord or a minor chord, I'm going to be using numbers like, let's take A, for example. Here's my A. If it was an A major chord or an A major scale, I'm going to be talking about the root note being the first note of the A major scale, A. The second would be there, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, and the eighth. So that's my A major shape. Really important shape. You can apply it anywhere, any major. And the minor shape looks like this. So my A minor would be, put my first finger on the A, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and my octave, my A. So I've got two shapes there. And they're scales, basically, the A major scale and the A minor scale. And you can apply them to any note. So, today, for our example, I'm going to be using some backing tracks. I've got one backing track that is just got two chords in it. One's an E minor 7 chord and one is an A7 chord, an A dominant 7 chord. The good news is for those of you who are just starting out, you don't even need to worry about this whole major, minor business. Just remember A and E. And for those of you who are more advanced, this should be familiar to you. I'm going to explain a little bit more about the chords and the scales and how we use them. So today we're going to use a 5-step process. For those of you just starting out, look at steps 1 and 2. For the more intermediate players, maybe look at 3 and 4. And for you advanced players, let's see where we go with step 5. So very simply, the first backing track is going to be E and A, and we're just going to play E and its octave, or its 8, backwards and forwards. So there's my E, it's on the 7th fret of the 2nd string, the A string here, playing with my my first finger, and then 2 strings down, 2 frets towards me, I'm playing the octave. You need to be able to do that. And then do the same on the A. So I'm down here on my E string now, the thickest string, I'm on the 5th fret, there's my A, and I'm going to play the octave A, 2 strings down, 2 frets towards me. So just moving backwards and forwards. Alright, that's step 1 to playing a walking bass line. Now, step 2 is we're going to add an extra note. We're going to add the 5th. Remember I talked at the start about those note numbers? So the 5th, wherever your root note is, the note that you're on, it's going to be 1 string down, 2 frets towards you. So now I'm going to play the root note, E, the 5th, B, and the octave. And then I'm going to play that 5th again, back down. So, just think about the positions. Alright, do the same thing for the A. So we've got a little bit more movement now, a little bit more sounding like a walking line. Alright, nice and simple. Now, for the more intermediate players, what we're going to do is we're actually going to arpeggiate these chords. So this is where chord knowledge is important. So our first chord is an E minor 7 chord. Our second chord is an A7 chord. An A7 chord is another name for it, is an A dominant 7 chord, and it's a bit like an A major chord, but it's got a minor 7. We'll get into that. So first off, E minor 7. So root note, E. Then the minor third. This is the new note that we're adding here. Alright, that gives it that minor sound. And then the 5th that we were using before, but I'm using a different finger to play it with. So root note, minor third, and 5th. Alright, and the other chord I said was an A dominant 7 chord. So we're going to play A, major third, and 5th. Alright? Alright. Now, Step 4 for you advanced players or intermediate players, these chords actually have 4 notes in them. They've got the 7th as well. So we're going to add the 7th. E minor 7. That's the minor 7 right there. And then the other one is going to be A dominant 7. Okay, E minor 7. Root note minor 3rd, 5th, and the 7th. And then the other one I mentioned was just the A dominant 7 chord, root note, major 3rd, 5th, and there's the dominant 7. Now to make it a little bit more interesting, I'm going to ascend there, and then on the A chord, maybe I could descend. Root note or octave, 5th, major 3rd. So you start to get movement, a nice smooth movement between the 2 chords. Now in our particular backing track we get to play each chord for twice as long, so it might not work quite as well. We might have to be a little bit more come up with a pattern, a sort of a moving pattern backwards and forwards just using those notes. Now, for the advanced players, step 5, what we do is we take something more of we'll call it a scalar approach, where instead of thinking about these as just chords, we think about them as scales in their own right. So the first chord was E minor 7, so I'm going to think about the E minor scale. That's it there, right? So what I can play now is on the E minor chord, the first chord, I could come up the scale, 1st, 2nd, minor 3rd, and then the 4th. And then maybe on the A chord, I could descend. So I could come back thinking of like an A major scale, but with a dominant 7. In other words, I flatten the 7th. That's the special thing about this. I could come back down. There's my A, there's my octave A, flatten 7, 6th, 5. Alright, so 8, 7, flat 7, 6, 5. Let me put those 2 together. I'm just going to do it sort of in half time, I suppose. E minor, 2, 3, 4, 8, flat 7, 6. So you can see how those 2 chords are just running into each other now. We're getting a true walking bass line. Now with our backing track, as I said, each chord, it lasts twice as long, so I'm kind of going to have to arpeggiate them a little bit. So I'm starting to use other notes from those scales, and I'm going backwards and forwards, but I'm trying to keep my movement fairly smooth, so I'm not sort of jumping around like this. I'm trying to keep my notes sort of as close to each other as possible. Now, here's the catch for you advanced players. Don't overthink this, right? I'm giving you a framework. I'm suggesting that you can play sort of the whole scales instead of just the chords, and you obviously need to know whether they're major or minor. And I'm suggesting also that you can move, maybe one chord you go up through the scale and the next chord you go down through the scale. That's all great stuff, but don't overthink it. If you follow those rules 100%, it's still going to sound a little bit boring. Don't be frightened to throw other notes in, other passing notes. That's what will make it sound really interesting. All right, so let's have a go and see if we can't make this work. All right, E and A. E, A. Just playing octaves. All right, step 2, add the 5th. Alright, now what I'm going to do for step 3 is I'm going to actually play the E minor shape, the root note, the minor third and the fifth, and the A dominant 7. I'm going to play A, I'm going to play the major third and the fifth, and then I'm going to add the 7. So this will be kind of step 3 and 4. Here we go. Alright, E minor 7. E minor 7 without the 7. A7 like a major. Alright, now I'm going to add the 7. Dominant 7. Alright, now a few more advanced players. Step 5, I'm going to start to use the other notes. So I'm now thinking more in terms of the scale, the E minor scale and the A major scale, but remembering with the major scale, I'm flattening the 7 because the A chord that we're really using here is a dominant 7 chord. So I'm going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to come back down, 8, 7, 6. Alright, now I'm going to extend it out a little bit further. Alright, you can start to use some of those other notes. Alright, I've got another backing track that I want to show you. This one's got 3 chords in it. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use octaves. I'm going to use octaves and fifths. I'm going to use just playing, arpeggiating the 3 notes of the chords. I'm going to add the 7ths, and then I'm going to do some walking using other notes. So here we go. We're going to have a D minor 7. Alright, there's my D. We've got a G7, G dominant 7, so I'm thinking of a G major scale, but I'm flattening the 7, so flatten 7, there's my G, my octave, and the last scale, the last chord is a C major 7, just a regular C major scale, and I can play backwards and forwards through that. So let's see how we go. D, G, and C for 2 bars. G, D, G, C. Now add the 5th. G, C, D, G. Now arpeggiate. Now add the 7ths. Alright, now we're going to actually walk this a little bit more. In fact, I started to get a little bit walking at the end there. It was kind of why I cut myself off. What we're going to do is we're going to play using any of the notes from the scales that belong to those chords. So we've got our D minor, we've got our G major. Remember, this is a G7 chord. It belongs to the major scale, but we're flattening the 7th. So, and C major 7, just all of the notes of the C major scale. Okay, you can play those. So this is the advanced approach. Let me just stop this. All right, so you've got 5 approaches there, and you can mix and match. Don't overthink this, especially as you're looking at more some of the intermediate and advanced approaches. I'm trying to give you a framework more than anything else, and then you can actually mix and match all of that. So good walking bass lines are actually going to use all of those techniques. So if you're just playing octaves, that's great. If you're adding the fifth, fantastic. If you're adding the third, so if it's a minor third, say a D minor, there's my third there. Or if it was a D major, it's going to be there, right? So I'm just adding an extra note, my root note, my fifth, and the third now. If your chord actually is a 7 chord, it's got like a 7 in it, it's a 4-note chord, you can play the root note, the major or the minor third, depending on what kind of 7 chord it is, the fifth, and then you can play the 7, which will either be a major or a minor 7 as well. This is obviously getting into a little bit more theory when we start talking about that. So let me just show you the 3 types of 7 chords. I'm going to use D as an example. A D minor 7 looks like, they're the notes from the D minor scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the octave. So 1, 3, 5, 7. Now, a D major 7 chord is going to look like, all right, sounds like that. And it comes from the D major scale, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we pick the 1, the 3, the 5, and the 7. And then the funny chord that we've been using a fair bit of today is what we call the dominant 7 chord, which is like using the major scale. So we use the root note, we use the major third, we use the fifth, but instead of using the major 7, which would be here in this case, I use the minor 7. So I steal the 7 out of the minor scale. And it's used a lot in jazz, it's used a lot in all kinds of music actually. It sounds like, looks like that. So when you're coming up with your bass lines, think about the chords if you're doing this analytically, but also think about the scales if you're an advanced player, and think about how you can kind of step from one note to another. Try and keep your notes close together, and trying to move your movement of your notes towards the next note in the chord, and don't always go back to your root note. So for example, if I was going from, let's say, D to G, if I'm walking up, right, instead of jumping all the way down to my G here, why not grab my G right there, the octave G, and walk back down from there? Sounds a lot smoother. Instead of that sounds okay, but it definitely has more of a walking smooth feel when you try and pick the root note of the chord that you're going to. So sometimes you're going to ascend a chord, sometimes you're going to descend through the chords or the scales. Experiment, and look, there's no sort of wrong notes in walking lines, right? So just hit a note and move on. Feel free to throw in some of those filler notes. Today is all about giving you a framework. Come and see me for a lesson. Find a great song that's got a great walking bass line. Blues is lots of examples in blues, and actually practice a few, and you'll be surprised how quickly this will come to you. See you next time for a lesson.